Good afternoon. I'm Jason Hicks, the district attorney here in Stevens County. I want to take just a moment and make a brief statement, and then we'll answer questions. First off, I would like everybody here, I would make a request of not only the media but the public as well, and that is to respect the decision that this family has made, respect the decision that they made to allow Alan to enter a plea of guilty and take 3 life without parole sentences versus going through a death penalty trial, which would have lasted a minimum of 3 weeks and probably a little bit longer than that, and then the 10 to 15 years worth of appeals. We've called the meeting here today, as you all have seen. Alan entered a plea of guilty to 3 counts of murder in the first degree for the death of his mom, his dad, and his sister. He's been sentenced to life without parole and with the Oklahoma Department of Corrections. He will never be out of prison again. I made that decision based upon a conversation that I had with this family. They approached me last week and told me that they did not want to go to trial, that they did not want the stress of this trial, and I have championed victims' rights since I was sworn into office a little over 5 years ago, and I am not going to allow my opinion and my feelings to stand in the way and put a family through something like that when that's not what they want. With that, I will answer any questions that anybody has.
Jason, I could barely hear what Mr. Hruby was saying, but I don't think he ever apologized to the family. Did you hear him?
I did not hear an apology come out of his mouth, no.
What do you think about that?
You take the life of 3 people and you don't have the decency to at least apologize for it. I think it reflects on who he is.
I didn't. The gentleman who spoke.
This is Richard Stein. This is Tinker's dad. Rose Stein, Tinker's mom, and Tinker's brother Richard is here as well. And you know, again, no, there was no apology, and I've not. From the time that we first learned of this event up until today's date, no, I'm not aware of any apology that was ever made. Sylvia?
He was ordered to not have any contact with the media and to not profit from this case. Is there any concern about that?
I think there was a little bit of concern, probably more on my part, that condition be put in there, because this family deserves to have this case done, and it deserves finality. Anytime you get into a situation like this, you know, what we didn't want to see happen is we didn't want to see a book deal or some kind of a movie deal where he had profits coming into his own pockets. We didn't want an interview because we don't want this to start all over again and to put this family through the torture that they went through a year and a half ago. And I think it's obvious if you were to ask them here today, they're going through all of the emotions they went through back in October of 2014. And quite frankly, it's time for it to end. And if he were going to enter a plea guilty and receive the benefit of avoiding the death sentence, that I think was one of the bare minimums that he needed to face and needed to do.
And did I hear correctly, he's also to not contact the family in any way?
That's correct. There's an additional stipulation in there that he have no contact with the family unless and until that contact is initiated by a family member. He's also waived his right to appeal in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, the life without parole sentence and those being consecutive, and the waiver of the appeals and the waiver of the ability to visit with the media or anybody else basically locks this down to the point that he's going to prison and nobody's going to hear from him again. And I think that's a good thing, and it's especially going to be a good thing for this family.
Will he be in special custody, general population? How will that be?
That's what facility he's housed in, and where he goes is a decision that's made by the Department of Corrections. The 2 maximum security facilities in the state of Oklahoma are going to be Granite and McAllister. It's my understanding that he will probably go back to McAllister, and he will be housed in the general population versus where he would have been if he were to receive a death penalty, which would have been the H unit. He would have been in a cell by himself with no contact with any other inmates. But yes, he'll be in the yard with all the other inmates at McAllister.
And did I understand it correctly that he was being treated for depression?
I don't know that I can necessarily give you an answer on that, Sylvia. It was indicated in his plea form that he had suffered depression, he was taking some type of medication. But beyond that, there's been no indication to me that there's any kind of a mental health problem with him in any way, shape, or form.
Jason, I do have
Yes.
one more question. This case, of course, any case of this nature is incredibly hard, not only for the family, but for the people that knew this family. This family is deep-rooted in this community, that anyone here at this courthouse, there was not one person they had in touch. Can you tell me just how difficult of a case this was for you?
I don't know how I can answer that, Sylvia, because I knew all three of them. I knew them well. My oldest child, 17, went to school with Catherine. Went to school with Catherine since she was in grade school. So, yeah, emotional toll on all of us. Yeah, no doubt about it. Because I look out here in this crowd today and know that if it wasn't them, Tinker and John would be sitting right there asking the same questions. We developed relationships with them, and I'd known them a long time. They were very, very good folks, and very much missed, and were very well respected and very well liked and very involved in this community. So yeah, it's been tough, I think, for everybody.
The letter from the sister that was read, is there a chance we could get that?
Yes, it's
Get it from you, or?
yeah. My office, Karen with my office has those. And if you go in the front foyer area of my office and ask for it, we will make copies for you. Yes.
One last question. As Mr. Hruby stepped through what he did that day, was it consistent with the earlier confession?
No, there were some inconsistencies. I think what he said today was more consistent with what happened, and it is certainly more consistent with the evidence that we had and would have presented to the court. Yes.
What did he say? I mean, we didn't even hear it. I mean, he just described shooting and
I had, and understand, I had a hard time hearing him as well. What I understood that he said was approximately 2 days before that he came down, went to the Marlow Review, which is the paper that the Hrubys owned, went in, parked in an alley, stole the firearm that his dad carried in his truck, stole that, put it in his Jeep, went back to Norman, and then he came back here on the 9th, which is a couple days later, parked his Jeep behind their house, and in what I guess maybe I'll describe as a little bit of an alleyway, went across the yard into the house where he shot his mom twice, his sister once, and then shot his dad twice as well. Then he described taking the gun, the DVR, and a couple other items out of the house, putting them in their storage shed, which is going to be straight across Highway 81, and then leaving there and going to Dallas for the weekend to the OU Texas game.
so he stole the gun from Marlow.
Correct.
There was some thinking that maybe he'd gone to outside the house and Duncan just he said he stole it.
That's he said he stole it from his dad's vehicle in Marlow. Yeah. Now, John, there's a police report that indicates a report from John of the stolen gun, and I don't remember the specific date on it, but that report was made to the Duncan Police Department because he would have discovered that at his house by the time he got back into Duncan that day.
Thank you, sir. Has he tried to contact the family?
I think he sent a letter or two. I'm not privy to the letters. I think he's had communication with a family member or two.
And in those letters, has he apologized in the past, as he did today?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
Did you come to him with a plea agreement, or did he initiate it?
Well, from the get-go, his defense team has asked for a life without parole recommendation, which we refused to do. And up until the point that this family came to me and said, we don't want a trial, we want this to end, up to that point we weren't willing to make that offer. And once we visited with them and visited with them extensively and determined that is what they wanted, then we picked up the phone and called them and told them we would do it. And that would have transpired very late, just this last Friday afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Do you feel without the
family stepping forward that he would have gotten the death penalty?
I'm confident that a jury in Stevens County would have given a death penalty. And to that question, with the letter that was presented to me, another thing that I didn't want to put this family through, and that would have been the possibility of them receiving subpoenas and being paraded in front of a jury and ask, what do you want? And in fact, you've sent a letter to the district attorney that says you don't want a death sentence. I think it would have made it extremely difficult for a jury anywhere to give a death sentence under the circumstances. So with all that combined and some other conversations that we had with the family, felt like this was the right thing to do and the most appropriate thing to do.
Jason?
Yes.
Have we had any additional or confirmation on why this happened in the first place?
I think that's a question that I will ponder for the rest of my career and probably the rest of my life, because I don't know. I don't know that we can ever answer that why question. I think that's one of the questions that every family that we deal with in a situation like this wants to know the answer to. But in this particular case, I can't say this is specifically why he did it. I do strongly believe that it was financially motivated, and that would have been presented to the court during the trial. Was that this was financially motivated, and that would be our explanation as to why. But to really get Alan to say this is why, that explanation has never been offered. Anybody else? All right. Thank you for being here, and if there's anything that we can do, provide information to you. If you have further questions, feel free to contact my office. Again, thank you.